IVM.
There are some creators who have a genuine knack of seeing what is going to work. Not just what works now, but what is scalable going ahead. These are the ones who at most times leave so many around them confused about the decisions they take, and also most times get to turn around and say, "See, I told you." For me, Tanmay Bhatt has been that person for a long time. I've known him personally for ages, and his instinct for what works in content has always been something that I've loved to tap into, to understand the road ahead a little better, and for me to learn something along the way as well. So I thought it was time to get him on the podcast to discuss the massive growth of his YouTube channel, his take on live streaming, and why neuroscience and dopamine are things he talks about so much more now than ever before. All this and more on this week's episode of Advertising is Dead. I'm Varun Dugirala, the co-founder and corner-chief of The Glitch. We're right back with Advertising is Dead.
बेटा, did you know 79% of all scientists in NASA are Indian only?
देखो, इंडिया में टैक्स सिर्फ मिडिल क्लास भरती है. Everyone is just enjoying free यार.
आजकल के youngsters are only interested in partying and enjoying. उनको देश की पड़ी ही नहीं है.
बेटा तुम बस शादी कर लो, उसके बाद तो you can enjoy life like anything.
I will tell you what this country needs. This country needs 15 years of dictatorship. That is the only way to become a superpower. See the Chinese, how much they've progressed.
सुनो, तुमने ये WhatsApp forward देखा?
So what's common between all of these statements?
They're all absolutely rubbish.
Fake WhatsApp forwards that spread like wildfire.
And statements that defy any logic.
We are here to debunk them all.
Way of family WhatsApp groups, worst nightmare. Where what happens when you read a book.
Basically, we are just a bunch of guys who want to cut through the bullshit of everyone saying this, how it won't be true.
So that the next time someone confidently squeezes out some WhatsApp or Twitter BS, you can look them dead in the eye and go, "Uncle, please sit."
So join me, Joel,
And me, Tushar.
every Mondays for a fresh new episode of Uncle, Please Sit.
So many years ago, when I was in Symbiosis studying, we had this beautiful festival called Festocom, which was an interesting name for a college festival.
Yeah.
Me and Rohit, in our maturity, decided to do a version of their Mr. and Miss Festocom, and we renamed it into Fox Stars because we thought it would be funny because it sounds like. So I said, "Oh, wow, cool, we'll call it Fox Stars." So, and I had just come back from an internship at MTV. So for me, it was like, I will make this a reality show. I had no idea how to shoot a reality show. But I said, I will make it a reality show. Tanmay Bhatt won that reality show.
Yes,
In
being the
Festocom.
attention
He was a
whore
Fox
that
star.
I am, I was a Fox star. And Varun Dugirala was the eager cameraman who would go behind me wherever I went. And you had your own version of this roadies interview, grilling interview with
Yes.
someone I remember.
Who was our deputy director at that point of time.
Yeah. That was very fun. That was our first introduction. And little did we know that we would be in the same line of business years later.
Yes. And little after that, you and I also met when you came on an actual reality show, which I did.
Yes, I
It
did.
was called MTV On the Job.
On the Job, which also I won.
Yeah, and where you defeated Varun Thakur.
That's true. Yeah, Varun.
You were
and
in
me.
one team, Varun Thakur. It was in contract advertising. You guys had to come up with a campaign, if I remember right, for Mentos.
Yes, for Mentos and Sandeep Deshpande. No, what's
Ravi
his name?
Deshpande.
Ravi Deshpande, who at that time I used to idolize because he was one of the many NCDs, which when you were in college,
Yeah.
the idea of an NCD was this person is an advertising rock star.
Yeah.
And this is the person that you need to impress. So I had read up everything about Ravi Deshpande. I was obsessed with advertising. I remember I was in National College and I just heard vague murmurs about Prasoon Joshi being at just around the corner, which is the cafe right beside National College. And I had a book full of interviews of Prasoon Joshi, Piyush Pandey and all these guys. Didn't know jack shit about advertising. I just knew that these guys were the legends. Then I ran to meet Prasoon Joshi. And my hands were sweaty. And I saw Prasoon Joshi. I said, "Oh my God, I have to say hi to him." Then I walked up to him and I put my hand. He refused to shake my hand because I was just sweating top to bottom. Then years later, I met him again. And I was like, I used to be like a crazy fanboy student. And it's interesting. It's interesting what life is like. Like now when I look back at college and I go like, I was so naive in life.
You also, I remember, and I think one more point where our paths almost crossed, but I think they didn't exactly cross, was you also at that point, I mean, in the days when you would write for television, the dark ages for all of us, you wrote for Lagegi,
I wrote for Lagegi. That was my first ever job. This is our mutual papa, which is Roshan Abbas.
Yes. Our mutual papa. So I had joined Encompass and I had run away from Encompass to go to MTV, and I had done 1 week of pre-production for Lagegi before I ran off.
Yeah.
And then you ended up working
Anirudh and Mantra. Two very talented guys. So Lagegi was supposed to be a stand-up comedy type show. That was actually my big break into the media world. I used to do the college festival circuit, as you know now. And I used to do the personality round and everything, because the personality round it's a mix of everything. You have to sing, dance, you have to prepare speech, and you have to know public speaking and whatnot. So I was a finalist at St. Xavier's Malhar. Zarina Mehta was a judge there, and she saw me there, and she told Ronnie Screwvala and the UTV team, saying this kid, he should come and intern at Bindas. So that's how I got in touch with Roshan Abbas, and Roshan and my friendship blossomed when I went to Encompass, and I was the only employee intern who would walk into office in shorts. And Roshan every day would come into office, see me in like these shorts, and he would laugh for hours because he could not fathom that anyone could be this casual about their work. And that's how me and Roshan became friends. And he's just so kind. Roshan is the kindest, and he's always been there since then.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
So obviously, over time, you did not want to work in advertising.
No, I didn't, because I realized that the money that they paid copywriters was laughable. And then when I got the same joy of seeing your work being seen by millions, but in television, why would you work in advertising? At the end of the day, like all copywriters, they work in advertising, but they all want to write a book or a movie.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they really want, which is they all want glory. 99% of the people in the world want glory. So I found my glory in other ways. And the second I discovered stand-up, which is glory in its most pure form, I just exited from television also.
The funny part about television then, and that was what?
2008, 2009?
Yeah, mid-late 2000s, was the fact that television then was trying to, and I think a lot of us were trying to do the kind of things which eventually became stuff that you would actually do online, but we were trying to do it on television and doing really weird things to try and stay within those rules and guidelines. But if you think of then and think of
now, it was very clear then who the online kids are going to be.
Correct.
In television, because I knew when the online boom happened, like all the friends that I had made in television, they all just immediately pivoted to digital.
Correct.
All were very, very happy doing so.
Yeah, that's when I remember when me and Rohit quit as well, right, to start Glitch. Our whole point was let's do stuff for the web, but it was literally television paid the bills initially, right, because the web didn't pay. And so I actually look at that time and said a lot of the stuff that happened then kind of set the benchmark of what the initial set of content online was as well. Right?
Yeah, it really did. And once the YouTube creator ecosystem, basically, like the web at one point was still the things that would go viral were still like images and posts and text stuff and etc. etc. Then Twitter happened in 2000. Like for me, Twitter happened 2009, 2010. That's when you really started understanding the scale of what online could be. This is me personally. I don't know what it was like for an agency to really see scale. Because television, it was understood that if something that you made plays at 9 p.m., it's understood it's been seen by millions.
Correct.
Right? Only on digital, it still took a while for you to see that million number.
Yeah. I think no one got it till maybe 2014, 2015. I don't think till then it was like, I remember initially we would go and try to sell something which would be online. Everybody would say, but online is free. Facebook's free. So, and we were like, no, someone's working on it. So,
yeah.
If you look at now, how has your thought process on content changed?
Oh man. Well, I think at that time, AIB, like how I used to make content at AIB and how I make content now as myself, the two biggest differences, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm talking purely creator specific.
Correct.
Creator specific, there are two ways to exist. One is you can be the expert, which is you come 3 times a month, but you hit hard. You have 3 shots, and one of these 3 has to be the moon shot, which is what a lot of comedians do. They'll upload 3 videos a year, 4 videos a year, one of them booms, sell tickets. Or you can be the PewDiePie model, which is you are in an audience's life every single day, and that breeds likability.
Yeah.
And to me, with being an internet personality, is so much about likability, especially if you're being funny, because someone that you don't like, you will never admit they are funny.
Correct.
It's just fact. Like a musician, if you don't like, you will ignore them. But if you don't like a comedian, you will personally go out to let them know that you don't like them.
Correct.
So for me, that's the prime difference. I think AIB never worked on we never worked on the likability aspect. I think in hindsight, we were the experts. We would come, do our bit, and then we would exit, and we were never in people's consciousness until the next time that we came. I think we were just, I think the talent that the 4 of us combined had was there was something about the 4 of us approving an idea or working on it together that we knew millions would enjoy. And we only discovered it after our first million, in 2013 or 2012, 2013 was the first big million sketch.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference for me now. Now I am in your life consistently. It's like I was watching a talk from someone the other day talking about super apps, right? Like at that time I was like, let's take an example of what's an app you would I like Make My Trip.
Yeah.
Right. Which is you open it once a month, right, for a very specific need, and you would have a great experience through it. It would lead to more joy, etc., etc. Now I'm like WhatsApp, right? Which is you open it every single day. And the advantage of being someone who's in an audience's life every day is you can be a super creator, which is you can do many, 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 many things.
Yeah.
Because your cadence is daily.
You can experiment a lot more also.
Way more. Like I was just telling someone the other day saying a vlog is a super format because a vlog can be emotional one day. It can just be 5 sketches strung together the next day. On the third day, it can just be an ad. Like I could just go to a hotel that could be paid for, but it's still great content because people are invested in you. You are the content. So it's a very big difference. And I find that the second one breeds fanaticism, right? The second one is like I call them bot army, right? They're so loyal to me. They love me. And these are my loyalty is to them. I think about what they would like to see next consistently.
Yeah.
Whereas what I would do at AIB was, what do I want to do that I think many people will like?
Yeah.
Here it's a lot more personal. So I think I would put it this way. The DAU on this format is very high, right? AIB wasn't that.
Yeah.
Which is, I find this very different, and that's why a lot more advantages. Which is why YouTube keeps saying, be consistent, be consistent, be consistent.
Yeah.
And I like that suggestion. But the way YouTube really works, sorry about this, but there's another thought that's coming.
Yeah.
The way one of the things in the YouTube playbook manual also, if you open the YouTube playbook manual, they actually tell you that find a format that works for your channel and then stick to it. So epic rap battles in history will only always ever do epic rap battles in history. They will only do rap. Right? Which is why a lot of people will open second channels for this channel is for this, but this channel is my other thing. Here's another place where I do. Like Technical Guruji has 2 channels.
Yeah.
One is very unboxes stuff and one is very unboxes his life or whatever way you want to put it. Whereas I like the PewDiePie way better, which is I'm here and I will just keep doing anything that I want.
Yeah.
And if you like me, if you're invested in me, you will consume anything, which is the model that I'm going for. And I think it came to me organically, which is where live streaming comes in.
Correct.
Ask your question now.
Yes. So, which is where I was coming to was live streaming, and you preempted my question, which is, so live streaming is interesting because I remember the first time when I saw it was when someone told me about an app called Twitch.
Yes.
And I read about it because Amazon had acquired it. I'm like, 1 second, what is this platform? And then I went through it and I saw what was going on there. I still didn't get it because I wasn't a gamer. I don't think I still am. I'm a sporadic gamer.
Yeah.
But once I started watching your videos, I actually kind of got what you're trying to do, but I also think there's a lot of insight there in terms of the thought process behind which you do it.
What did you see by me?
I saw the fact that it was almost like very bizarre connections. That if anybody has ever seen Takeshi's Castle, which was one of the best things ever, was you were watching something happening, but what you came for was as much for the commentary as the action.
As the action.
This is what this is.
100%.
Yeah.
So traditionally, so the insight is this, right? There is, let's put it this way. A platform's job is to enable their creators' claim to rockstar. Right? So YouTube enabled video makers' claim to rockstar, and they made them rock stars.
Yeah.
TikTok enabled anybody who could sing, dance, perform, look good. It enabled them to become rock stars. Right? And it was only a matter of time before any platform that enabled gamers who play games really well become rock stars. Now you tell me, amongst all of these people, which is the largest audience? People who play games, people who can sing and dance, or people who can make videos?
Gamers.
Everybody plays games. Every single person. So to me, it was a no-brainer that something like a Twitch would exist and would do phenomenally well. Because most people play games in some way or the other. Gaming, I mean, now Mr. Mukesh Ambani has said it's a bigger industry than music and movies combined.
Yeah.
So now maybe people will take it seriously. So I was never a gamer. Right? I played games. I've always played games. I just wasn't very good at them. But I loved games. I loved observing games. And to me, the insight was high dopamine release plus any genre is significantly better. Gaming inherently is very high dopamine release. Right?
Yeah.
So gaming is a risk in that sense. But I knew a comedian gaming would be interesting. Like when I would play PUBG with my friends, naturally I would be funny and I would make jokes. And when I went through peak depression, I was addicted to Soul Mortal, Scout, and all these guys. I was watching their videos all the time. I didn't know why. Then I started doing some reading on my brain and I realized, dopamine release, this is, there's comfort in familiarity, etc., etc., etc. I said, okay, maybe I should start streaming. The streaming was a desperate attempt at trying to get out of the depressive phase. I felt like I'm not being productive. What if I just stream what I'm doing 6 hours a day anyway?
Yeah.
At least some media will come out of it. And media can lead to disproportionate returns, etc., etc. And I started doing that. Then I really understood the game. Streaming breeds loyalty because in an increasing world of hyper connectivity, individuals are greater than brands. Individual connect is greater than brands. Hence, if you are in someone's life in the most authentic way, where they can touch you very easily, like every part of this sentence has meaning, where they can touch you very easily will breed loyalty. Let me explain what that means. If you're in someone's life daily, streaming is low effort. If you have OBS, it's very easy for you to stream, and you can stream anything. So a really smart streamer will go beyond just playing PUBG. Every single day in real time. Anybody who is live right now, in their most authentic way, because when I see you live, you cannot be lying about who you are. Especially if I see you live every day. Especially if I see you live for 4 hours a day, you cannot lie. And if they can touch you. When I say touch you, I mean if 100 kids spam saying watch this video by Aranya Johar. Right? I'm watching chat. I will end up watching it. It's the sort of control that an audience has always died to have over a creator. Naturally, the level of dopamine release is so high because there is immediate gratification, there is immediate recognition of what someone has said, plus there's the element of super chat. If you want to stand out from someone, you can super chat something, a popular face will see it, recognize it, give a response, and that is super gratifying. This has not existed in the history of broadcast media, where individuals can become their own media and audiences can dictate what they do and interact with them. This has never existed. This is why it was destined to be big, and it will continue growing from this point.
Yeah, because live is so interesting for me, because I remember when lockdown started and people were just doing Instagram lives all the time, and I saw a lot of them, and I was like, okay, I don't see how this is good, because I would see that 20 people are on it, 30 people are on it. There is somewhere a lot of people are there. But then I see the live streams on YouTube and I see a very different version of what people are doing.
Yeah.
At some point, what works on live is really the question, right? I mean, what works on live for, let's say, a digital platform? And I think the formats are similar, but what should you really do to make it work on live?
Look, it's very simple. And this goes for all content. It's just especially harder for live. Live depends on your algorithm tells you it depends on the algorithm, how many people will come to watch you. Okay. If you have bell notifications on, those many people will be notified. What your title is, people will come for the title. If you do the same thing every day, eventually people will be like, I get what he's doing. Unless that's the thing that you're doing is what people want to watch you for. Second is retention. When people come to your live stream, if the average retention time is high, you are more likely to get a huge watching. For example, 100 people come, they're watching me for 3 minutes. The algorithm goes like, oh, this is pretty good. They've been watching him for 3 minutes. Let me push this to more people on their timelines. You'll show up on more people's timelines. They click on it. That 100 has become 200. Now, of those 250 will leave.
Yeah.
But what you're left with is 150, which is 50% more than before. Right? Now we come to retention. What do you do to retain people? Right? Retention purely comes down to dopamine release. Purely. Right? How is dopamine released? Right? This is a whole subject. There are many, many ways dopamine is released. But one of the ways is prediction. If the audience has predicted something and it comes true on screen, dopamine is released. Right? Anticipation, prediction. In gaming, the game is built for maximum dopamine release.
Correct.
Every time you kill someone in PUBG, boom, a big red thing comes. You'll emote. Then what the dopamine release that the creator brings on, looking at chat, saying, hey, this is what you guys are saying. Then there'll be one super chat that comes in. So like if you create stuff like, oh my God, if I get 10 kills this game, I'm going to dance to Gaadi Wala Kachra Nikal. I have done this, by the way. 25,000 watching, right? Because I've built anticipation. So they're just waiting for that moment. And then you game that even further. Oh, I didn't get 10 kills this game. Okay. Second game, at 8 kills, I have killed myself. Right? Deliberately, I will go somewhere and I'll try and die. The audience will like, this is scripted. I'm like, it's not scripted. You can't script this stuff.
Yeah.
You can just be agile. It's like when they used to say Roadies is scripted. Roadies is not scripted. There are tools you use to plan certain stuff, but that's it. Yeah. So it's like that. It's like creating your own show, except the whole thing is...
You build a loose framework in which you want to play, and then you let the magic happen.
Yes, a loose framework. So at the beginning of the stream, if I get an idea saying, this is what I will do, cool. Today we're going to do, there was a guy called Ojas that I play PUBG with, right? He's a kid that I discovered in the game. I used to play with random people. I discovered he turned out to be a fan. I've been playing with Ojas for 6 months now. Nobody knows what Ojas looks like. That day we did a stream called Ojas Face Reveal. Ojas was in a mask and glasses, right? Every time me and Samay reached 5 kills, one item of clothing will come off his face. Hat came off, this came off. 30,000 watching. Because people are just like, oh, it's like, so it's just a small trick that we used just to game it. Last night was the ultimate. Last night at 3 a.m., me and Nishant Tanwar have been doing 3 a.m. TikTok Shraddhanjali streams, which is we watch TikToks and we try and decode it. He plays doctor, I play patient. I'm like, Doctor Saab, kya ho raha hai is TikTok mein? And we will analyze and decode it. Now, I just knew this would work because TikToks are inherent dopamine bombs. Right? In 15 seconds, 15 things are happening.
Yeah.
The built-in content is so engaging. I knew that it would work. So I would plan that in the end of the stream, there's one particular TikTok about water spitting. Me and Nishant would end the stream with both of us spitting the water whenever they spit the water. That's it. So we ended on a 35,000 high, like 35,000 people were watching by the end at 3 a.m., which is insane numbers. I've never seen these numbers. So streaming is the most exciting way of making content because
it's so raw also.
It's so raw and it's so on the fly. And to me, someone who can game streaming is a marketing genius because on the fly, you spot what an audience wants, you react to it, you act on it, and you're so agile.
Yeah.
So the best I would say gaming streamers, they're just fantastic at the game. But the best streaming entertainers, right, who are combine entertainment with streaming, there's some super smart brain that's going behind it. Which you can't learn this shit. You can't teach this in schools.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so new. Like streaming should be, there should be a fucking course. I'm going to that course. Sorry, I don't know why I said that out loud.
You mentioned dopamine. You mentioned all this a lot of times, and I do know that on your second channel you started. Yeah. Why? When you told me the other day that you're talking about neuroscience a lot, I'm like, I didn't even understand why you are suddenly into neuroscience. I'm getting it a little bit now.
No, I'll tell you. So that's a fair question, right? So the two channels. So when I started gaming, super young audience, right? There's between 16 to 20. A lot of them, I think 30% of my audience is there. 16 to 24 is about 50% of my audience. The remaining 50 is over 24. Then there is some between 40 to 50, which I think is just kids using their parents' phones.
Yeah.
I don't think any 40 to 50 year olds are watching me. So a lot of these kids are, how do we put it? The prefrontal cortex is still underdeveloped. Right? Prefrontal cortex is what gives you context. It's the context part of the brain. It's maturity, personality, everything comes. It's the last part of the brain. Animals don't have this part of the brain, right? They're very young. They're very immature. They don't know how the world works. They don't know the truth about life. And I thought that there needs to be another vehicle to separate the kids from who want to learn and grow from what I do here. Right? And also I have an older audience that's grown with me for a very long time who don't like me for this. They want me doing what I do. So I created a separate channel for that. And I realized that because of high dopamine addiction, by the way, you will not believe the stuff I've learned there. Dopamine is released in our brains even when we look at a symmetrical face. When we look at a nice face, dopamine is released in your brain. Why do you think Instagram scrolling is addictive? Why are so many kids just looking at models on Instagram? Every time you look at a pretty face, boom. Right? Every time you look at a sexualized image, boom, dopamine. That's why it's addictive. Because of such a high rate of dopamine being released everywhere, learning is very difficult. Why is it very difficult? Your brain's tolerance for dopamine is far too high. Learning also releases dopamine. How does learning release dopamine? If a plus b the whole square equals to a square plus 2ab plus b square, your brain predicts what it could be, and that releases dopamine, technically. If you've studied this once before, and then if you're revising it, then this happens. This is the longer process. It's harder, and lesser dopamine is released. Right? So it's just going to be insanely difficult for the next generation to learn and grow. Like
because they're used to faster release now than we ever were.
The tolerance is far too high. Like to me, if I find a kid at 18 who's interested in reading books, this guy is going to be richer and far more successful than all his friends. Because all his friends are addicted to dopamine in 15 other ways. There's pot, there's gaming, there's pornography, there's sugar, there's alcohol. It's all around us. And when you're 18, that shit really ruins your life and you don't recognize it. I'm not saying don't do it, but the addiction, we don't even know when we're addicted. I was addicted to gaming for a year. When I say addicted, I mean 6 hours a day at 30, dude. That's insane. And so when you're 18, how are you going to live your life? At 18, what did we have, Varun? We had college festivals. That's what we had. We didn't have shit. So I looked at this and I said, there has to be a way to bring back dopamine into learning. And I thought comedy is an easy dopamine release. So let's bring that. So I created a second channel for this reason. And it's very heartening that when I do neuroscience streams, the depression stream got 8,000 concurrent viewers. The last one, neuroscience of music, got 5,000 concurrent viewers. And kids are speaking the gaming language, but with neuroscience in it. They're like prefrontal cortex OP, and they're talking like this. Which I'm like, cool. At least they're learning something through this.
Yeah. And it's also in their language, like you said, right? So, and this is actually, it brings me to an interesting point that the way we teach, and that's what everyone's talking about, like the fact that a lot of people are being taught now Zoom calls, and I remember the video you put out where what kids are actually doing on those Zoom calls, and I laughed so much when I saw that.
It's insane, right?
Yeah, and it's obviously natural for them to screw around with that, but it's also so sad for the teachers who are trying so hard, but they're obviously in a whole different world in that sense.
Man, yeah, teachers have it really tough because we're slowly moving into a world where, and I don't mean to be a dick here, but we're slowly moving into the world where teaching is going to be far more democratized, right?
Yeah.
Like right now the system isn't that. Right now you need a degree.
Yeah.
You need Mumbai University's consent.
Yeah.
You need to be hired by a school or a college in order to be a professor or a teacher.
Yeah.
But in today's world, it's being decentralized. Today, I am teaching. I have no authority to teach. No one told me I could teach, but I am teaching.
Yeah.
So I think teaching as a profession is going to slowly die unless being from a certain, not unless, this will always remain.
Yeah.
Certain colleges, universities will always have signaling value over it. So being a professor there or a teacher there will always have more value. And teaching entirely is going to go online and it's going to pivot to video. The player that does high dopamine teaching, who would you rather have as a professor? Simple, middle-aged, extremely well-learned man, or a funny fat uncle teach you concepts about chemistry?
Also,
it's the funny uncle.
I was the other day, and I came across this term, right, called VARK, V-A-R-K, which basically said that in actuality, human beings are actually, they learn in 4 different ways. You're either a visual learner, you're an audio-based learner, you like the traditional read and write, or the last one, which I didn't even know was a thing. I just went through my notes to find it. It's called kinesthetic learner. You need to do something to learn. So which means if you don't take the notes down yourself, or if you don't draw that thing yourself, if someone shows it to you, you don't like it. You need to do something with it. So
I didn't know that.
Supposedly all human beings, and when you're saying this, I remember I put that down somewhere, and it makes sense in this. We've never used all senses in many ways to teach. It's always in sit down, teacher, and that actually hasn't evolved as much.
We've not even learned bidirectional. Like we're not even asked a question. Why is this way? Yeah. Why? We're not even taught why.
Yeah.
And I think India needs it more than ever, man. If we are a country that is a slave to middle class thinking, and if this generation needs, like, the internet could have been the vertical velocity to pull us out of this thinking, and some of us have used it in the right way, but most kids are going to suffer. So I think teaching is going to be the biggest, like, the disruption there. I can't wait for it to happen. Now they will, because of COVID, it'll get accelerated, but I hope some things will be irreversible.
Yep. Like, that's one of the things about doing this podcast, right? For me, it's been the fact that at some point, kind of teaching people who want to work in this space different sides of things and just kind of get that out and not go standard spiel jargon about it.
Yeah.
And you obviously have worked with brands over time. If I'm a brand today and I don't even understand, forget live stream. Like, live streaming is so new. How do I stay on point about how do I work with, let's say, live streaming? How do I work with all the kinds of content which you are kind of working on, which is so widespread now, but is so new to all of them?
Man, every brand is different, but here are some insights that I have about brands and marketing folks, right? I think in the future, creators will be marketing folks. Right? It's already slowly happening in America. Creators who couldn't get your 10 million following end up getting a marketing job, purely because marketing professionals' job is either to create something that gets applause from an audience or to recognize something that will get applause.
Correct.
And anybody who has kinesthetic learning, which has done it, has worked, has sat down, their judgment will be sharper, right? Essentially, a marketing professional is getting paid to do what? For the judgment.
Yeah.
Which is
what
this
will get someone's attention?
What will work? What will get someone's attention? Is this worth the money? Is there a smarter way to get this? And anybody who has been a creator would have better judgment on top of it. Kunal Shah puts this really well. His whole company is filled with engineers, product guys, marketing guys, all of whom are part-time creators. Some poets, comedians. They're in a band.
Yeah.
That's why the product is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because anything bad, you can't. The creators in the room won't lie. They won't say this is great because they just know when something is great.
Yeah.
So I think if you're a brand and if you're not filling your marketing team with creators, you should fill them with creators.
Yeah.
I mean, a good example is look at Zomato, right? Look at Akshar Pathak.
Yeah.
Why is Zomato so fantastic? It's because Akshar Pathak is putting up 10 posts on his Instagram every day. It's what keeps his brain fueled. So when he's creating for Zomato, he knows what creative will work because he's done it for himself.
Yeah.
So you know this. So I work with One Hand Clap, which is run by Akash Shah and his team. Every single person in that team has 10,000 followers on Instagram. Every single person. So naturally, the stuff that they make for the brand will be of a certain quality because they're just used to.
They understand culture. Right? They understand what works in that
what
space.
Works. They understand what will get double taps. They just get it. So this is one thing that I think brands need to seriously think about when you're hiring your marketing team. And I don't want to diss MBAs. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish in MBA schools they would also teach creation. I wish they did that.
Yeah.
Because when you
might just have to now.
Yeah, because when you Varun, because a team with creative professionals and a J type, right? The J type is what your MBA is unbeatable. Right, especially if they respect the J type. If the J type has enough control over the team, is unbeatable. Because
he or she can put structure around it.
Man, structure with enthusiasm is unbeatable.
Yeah.
So I think that's what brands need to look at because just maximum energy is wasted in the best brand managers are people that I've spoken to where I get on a call. Hey, Rick, मैं ये करेगा. सही है करते. Boom, just got it instantly.
Correct.
It's happened with a couple of companies in Bangalore with people either that I know or have been creators themselves. Just spot a great idea and then just the speed of execution becomes faster.
Yeah.
So this I think is super important. The second thing I would advocate is we are moving. I think advertising will also get decentralized. The advertising model needs to be decentralized. There needs to be more skin in the game for people who are making that content.
Yeah.
So some of it is already existing, right? Some of it is there are skin in the game advertising models that are being discovered, I think, which I think there will be more and more of. I think we no longer need to hire talent to be in one company. To me, the future is if I'm a writer, if I'm a copywriter, and if I'm a marketing professional, right, who's handling a brand. Yeah. They both wake up in the day. Yeah. They both open a dashboard. The marketing guy has put out one brief saying, hey, I'm looking for this idea for this. The most trust on one platform. Say the platform is X. The writer wakes up and opens their dashboard. What are the briefs that are floating in the market today? Right? Yeah. Quickly clicks on a brief, writes down, here are 2-3 ideas that I have. And the writer has, based on previous work, has a trust rating, has a previous portfolio, this is what work I've created, this is the results that it had. Yeah. And the marketing professional opens one dashboard and he sees, oh, this person has this idea, this person has this idea, this person has this idea. Right? Cool. I like with this. Let's work for the next 2 weeks on this campaign. You come on board. Yeah. By the way, there's an editor in Slovakia who's done this kind of work before. Why don't you guys work together on this?
Correct.
Here's here. Because you don't need, it's like, why would a marketing professional be happy with the 4 ideas that the 4 copywriters from the one agency that you have hired per month? Why should that be limiting to what you should be able to do? So I think this to me is the ultimate future. If you can wake up an idea, anybody can give you an idea that works for you in that way.
And now I think a lot of, which is why there was a time when if there was an agency for a brand, then the brand would only work with that agency. Now, even if you are the retainer agency and handling day to day and just like looking at strategy, etc., the number of other partners they'll work with. I mean, it's I think it's part and parcel how everyone looks at it now.
Yeah.
But it makes sense also. It then puts everybody on their toes and saying, okay, someone else is doing this. So can we, rather than saying, oh, someone's taking it away from us, like, what am I learning from this? Like, so I can kind of up my game as well.
Yes. And I think, so this, I hope more of this happens. You're right. I think this is great. I think influencer marketing also can change dramatically. I'm working on some stuff to try and do that from my end. Let's take, I'm coming back to PewDiePie and G Fuel, right? It's the ultimate love marriage. You won't think of any other beverage. Whenever he sees a beverage, he plugs in G Fuel, right? Because I'm pretty sure there is an equity deal there.
Oh yeah.
Right? I'm pretty sure his skin is in the game, right? And it makes so much sense. It makes sense for him. It makes sense for them. You won't think of any other beverage around PewDiePie. I don't think enough long-term partnerships are being created with influencers, especially recognizing influencers that you know will be around for the long term. I think too much people are expecting far too much from short-form influencer campaigns. Or if you're going to do influencer campaigns, this is one thing I've learned from content. Doing ridiculous things at scale is far more attention than doing something normal at scale. First of all, anything at scale is greater than anything not at scale when it comes to marketing.
Best example for me is Will Smith, right? There's nothing he puts out that does not show immense scale, but it is nuts, but it just works.
It just works. Now, if you open your Instagram feed and 50 influencers are doing something ridiculous, it's just, I'm not going to forget it for a long time. Instead of 4 of them in a story somewhere doing this, you're really like, nowadays brands are sending me a request for, can you show me your Instagram story statistics? What did the story achieve? I'm like, this, you're just doing this to fill your PPT. It's you're thinking about branding is so unconscious. Like swiping up is so unconscious, you know. It really comes down to what I said in the story. I could say swipe up for surprise. Phad jayegi teri post. You know what I'm saying? If you're just going to measure this thing, I could put up that graphic of, you know, make this football go into goal. Everyone will do that. It will go. It really comes down to that. It's, you know, don't pay for that. Pay for the signaling. Pay for the trust. Pay for what is this thing, and all that happens when there is long-term partnerships. So I think more and more brands should do that.
I think what you're saying is also interesting for people who want to work in this space, right? Because a large part of people who listen to this are either finishing up college or just started their careers, and most time the question is that, okay, just like, what do I need to make sure I'm good at? What do I make sure I learn, etc. And I think that's really the big worry for a lot of them.
Are you talking about creators?
Creators, people who want to work in agencies, people who want to work for brands. I think people who want to work at agencies, I would come back to that, which is just, no matter what you do, if you're in marketing, you must create. I was talking to you the other day, remember? Isn't it satisfying to have a feedback loop in your life? Is to have a conversation with someone, edit that, put that out, see the number. So now your judgment has been refined just by creating something consistently. You know, you would now be able to judge what content is better naturally. And I think everyone should do this. So if you are working in an agency, please actively create something on the side. Even if you're not creating, at least creating publicly. You know, create a private, you can write songs, learn how to play something, just do anything that, okay, let me phrase it this way. Find yourself an enjoyable feedback loop that you would do for no money. Right? If someone asks me saying, Tanmay, you're working, you keep talking about optimizing for wealth. What would you do if you had all the money in the world? And I think one of the answers that popped up, I would run a YouTube channel. This is just what I would do. It's so joyful for me to go like, this happens if I do this. Okay. I would just do podcasts for life. That's what I would do.
What else? You would just do this. Because the human brain is designed to find flow, especially the smarter ones, right? Flow is when your challenges meet your skills. When your challenges are too high, then it's anxiety. But when your challenges are too low compared to your skills, it's boredom. And the best feedback loop is when it's just the right amount for both. As you upskill, you have to increase your challenge. Life is, this is exactly what a video game is. Life is a video game in that sense. It is a game. and you keep playing that game. You just keep changing the game every now and then, depending on what you feel like.
Yeah. Towards the end of every episode, I do this segment called Humans of Advertising, right? It is me doing random questions. It is not rapid ever. It digresses into many directions. If somebody had to, if you had to tell someone about something that you consume which people wouldn't assume that you'd be a consumer of, or which you obsess over, what would that be?
Oh man, someone had to, what I consume,
read about. It could be anything, just something which you haven't really been as, like, you're not out there with it, but it's something like really you're into that, like.
Oh man, so there's a documentary. I'm really into Area 51 right now. There's a really cool documentary called about Area 51 on Netflix. I forget what it's called. I'm super into these conspiracy theories right now. I am super into stock market knowledge right now. Like yesterday, I tweeted about Small Case, the product.
Okay.
Right, and I just tweeted it, and just the response was, "What the 4 different fintech founders got in touch with me.
Yeah.
Oh, Tanmay, you're also into stocks." And I'm like, yeah. If you notice my streams. Like I've had Zerodha, Small Case, investing.com on my bookmarks for the last 6 months. Like I'm consuming. So there's this YouTube channel called CA Rachna Ranade. Okay. She's this lovely lady who teaches about stock markets, and she sings really nicely. And so I've just been binging her channel because I wanted to learn. That I'm going through Varsity by Zerodha. So this is my on the down low, because I'm also making personal finance content, so I'm super interested in this space.
Yeah.
So this is something that I'm super into. I am addicted to right now. Like, I would never tell him this, but I'm addicted to the Flying Beast. He's a vlogger. I'll tell you what, man. Like what the guy does is so fascinating to me. I love watching his videos and I love seeing the comments. And I told him once, saying, you are running a soap. You have replaced daily soaps for millions of people. Because what you are doing is you're presenting your family in your most authentic way, and everybody wants that. Everybody wants a gorgeous daughter, a lovely wife, and everybody wants a relationship with your parents. Everybody wants to be a physically strong IIT graduate pilot who looks like a beast. Like you are the protagonist of a soap. And I started watching him when he was doing these series of videos where he almost, like, there was a video saying, I'm getting tested for COVID. Yeah. That's where his channel also, like, everything doubled after that. And I started watching it there. And it's like a show. Everything that he does, it's like you're following these characters, your brain predicts a character will do this. And when they do, there is dopamine release. This is why we like sitcoms. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm reading books about brain. I don't know if it's obvious. I'm reading.
You literally answered 2 of my next couple of questions. You already given me a recommendation, and you also have.
I realize that I'm over speaking a lot, but it's fine.
No, that's perfect. That's what podcasts are for.
I told you earlier on only. I love the sound of my own voice.
This is what podcasts are for.
So can I tell you something about the brain that I learned recently? Super fascinating on the last NeuroStream, right? So your brain, we were discussing neuroscience for music. The parts of your brain that get activated when you're listening to music are the same parts that you use to for any form of locomotion, right? Any form of movement. For example, this is a cup. You guys can't see it, but I'm holding up a cup. There are certain parts of the amount of calculation that goes on in your head when you have to lift a cup, right? Because so many things could go wrong. Correct. You have to calculate how hard you have to grab the cup. You have to calculate how quickly your hand has to travel to the cup. Once you grab the cup, you have to calculate how quickly you lift the cup, because
so
your brain
doesn't fall.
The water doesn't fall. Your brain has to also calculate using memory how much fucking water is inside this before you picked it up. So many things can go wrong in just picking up a cup. But your brain, you take for granted that it never goes wrong. It's insane. Now the same brain also is, the same parts of the brain are activated when you listen to music. But so the calculations it is doing is different frequencies at different hertz, all strung together. And that's why the melody makes sense. And dopamine is released when you're able to predict the next frequency or this thing. Why do you think you're happy when there's a drop? You know, why do you think repetition of the chorus? I think
Because you know it's going to come. You're waiting for it, waiting for it, and it's...
That's why there is dopamine release every single time. Now, here's the kicker. Here's the best part. Because the same parts are activated when you're lifting a cup and listening to music. What's the one thing you're doing when you're listening to music? What's the one thing you're not doing when you're listening to music? You're not moving. Which is why, because the same parts are activated, you start bobbing when you're listening to music. Because the same parts of the brain are activated. The brain is like, oh, usually when these parts are activated, you're moving, buddy. Why are you not moving? And because your brain recognizes patterns of percussions in the thing, it makes your body move at the same time. So the
groove happens, right? Even at a festival, you're doing all of that stuff.
You're just moving your head.
Yeah.
And you know why you like doing that? Because every time your brain predicts correctly that you should move at this beat, little dopamine is released. Which is why we love dancing.
Yeah.
This is why we love dancing. Because there is dopamine release when you move the right body part at the right moment and it all sinks in your brain. Your brain is like, maja aa gaya. This is why we like dancing. What a fascinating thing the brain is. I love it.
That is such... It makes sense in terms of the head bobbing. I'm thinking about it right now.
Yes.
Because when you said that, I thought about the drop, right? For me, I remember the time when I listened to a lot of electronic music and EDM. You would always wait for that. You know, it would wind up, and there was one drop and the crowd would go mad. Because it's literally like they've been waiting. It's like...
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you even one more thing that will blow your mind.
Yeah.
Right? Why do you get goosebumps sometimes when you listen to music? Right? The brain is predisposed to survive.
Yeah.
Right? As a creature, as creatures, we can either die or we can survive. Right? Evolution makes us want to survive and propagate. So every part of the brain is made to calculate whether any stimuli is procreation or threatening. I'm paraphrasing really badly. Threatening, right? Which is why screams will scare you.
Yeah.
Screams are also frequencies, right? At the end of the day, there's no difference between a scream and music. Technically, they're just sounds with frequencies.
Correct.
Right? But screams are associated with death, so they scare you, right? Sometimes when there is a sound that your brain wasn't able to predict, it feels threatening. But there is another part in your prefrontal cortex, you know that it's not threatening, right? That's when you get goosebumps. Because biologically you're scared, right? But some part of you knows, but you're not in threat. Which is why you get, what is this feeling that I'm getting? So it's...
You and I are going to do a random conversation about these things on another episode. I have a feeling this demands multiple episodes of...
I'd love to. I'm super fascinated by the brain.
And
neuroscience application in content creation also. So the next stream is about addiction in gaming, which is really about content creation. So you should probably check that out. You'll really enjoy it.
And my last question, as always on this show, is why will advertising not die?
Oh,
or will it die?
No, it won't. So advertising in the traditional sense will die, which is in the most traditional sense. But advertising will never die because humans are mimetic in nature. Humans want to mimic superior humans. That's just how we are.
Yeah.
So advertising will always be about a superior life involving superior humans, and everybody will always want to have a more superior life. So advertising will never die for that reason. The modes of advertising will change. Advertising as a concept will never die.
Yeah.
You know. So that's why I don't think advertising will die.
Thanks for doing this, man. This has been a lot of fun. And this, like I said, this demands multiple episodes, not just one.
Happy to. I would love to do neuroscience of advertising, man. We should do it. You should come on the stream when we do that.
Part 2 will be that.
Done. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. It's been a really, really cool week on the network. We've had Ashwin Sanghi on Cyrus Says. We had Masaba Gupta on Advertising is Dead. You should definitely check out Vivek Lath, who showed up on Storytellers and Story Sellers. A close friend and partner of ours, Karthik Parija, was on the Pragati podcast talking about the future of podcasting, which I think is really, really interesting. And I would like to ask people to check out All Things Policy and what they've been doing. They've been having some really interesting discussions about India's challenging relationship with China as we go forward, and I think that would be a great thing for you guys to check out. So with that, we hope to see you again next week.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer, creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story-sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Storysellers for personal stories, analysis and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.